Is everybody seeing my screen? Okay, perfect. All right, so what we're going to go over today, first, we're just going to talk about, what is mental health to make sure we're all on the same page, and then talk more specifically about youth mental health and what might be some signs or symptoms that you might notice in your child or their friends or any young person that's in your life. Then we'll shift into some of the strategies of how you can help, and then end with a lot of focus on self-care, resilience, and recovery, and remembering that one of the best things we can do for our young people is make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as well, because they do look to us, and it's critical that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can take care of them. So to get us started, we're going to talk just about, what does mental health mean? So I know some folks might be getting ready for dinner and things like that, but if you could, just drop in the chat, when you hear the term mental health, what does that mean to you? What comes to mind? Calm, excellent. Emotional well-being, that's definitely a component of it. Ooh. How you feel about yourself, absolutely. Peace within, handling difficult situations well, nice, I really like that. Awesome. I appreciate all of those thoughts, because I think all of that and more, I know some of you are still thinking, you may not be typing, but all of that is part of mental health. And so when we define mental health for the purposes of this presentation, we look to the World Health Organization, which talks about mental health as a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well, and work well, and contribute to their community. So I think all of the things that you all shared is very similar, well-adjusted. I appreciate. So mental health does not mean someone who is happy all the time, things are going great, they're just rainbows and unicorns every day. It is being able to cope with the stressors of life and not having that kind of setback too far, that you're able to sort of have those highs and lows, but they don't derail you, or they don't take you away from really being able to do the things that you love to do. Like they say, realize your abilities, engage in school, engage in work, engage with friends. Anything that is not impairing that is really going to be good mental health. And I think there are multiple aspects of that. So thinking about it in a more holistic way, I think, is really important as we think about this discussion. The other thing that we like to highlight is that mental health really is on a continuum. So all of us are on this continuum, right? We all have some aspect of our mental health, and we might be in the healthy range where things are functioning pretty well. We're able to do the things we want to do. We can work, we can live life pretty well. Then there may be, a good chunk of us that get into that more yellow zone where maybe things, you're starting to be affected. There's something that's going on that has maybe shifted so that now you're experiencing some more distress or some more stress. Maybe you're having some signs and symptoms that are you're noticing them. And then you can shift into more the orange zone, where now there's actually so much going on that it is more severe, more persistent. This is the injured zone, where really, things are starting to impact you in a more significant way, versus what this continuum calls ill. We would say, maybe somebody that would actually meet the criteria for a mental health disorder. So this is where there is more significant functional impairment. So symptoms of mental health are getting in the way of some other important aspect of life. And so as it's a continuum, we all can be somewhere on that continuum on any given day in any given week. And if you reflect on your own life, I think it's probably easy to think about, there were probably times where things were going pretty well, and then probably some times where things were not going as well. And maybe even for a lot of us, there were times where we did need to reach out and get some help because we were further along that continuum. But then once you get that support, that help, whether that's professional or just personal, your own social network, things that you do for yourself, the hope is that you're able to then move back towards the green side of this continuum so that you're in that more healthy realm. But a lot of things can affect this. And it's just important to remember that even though we might be doing well today, that doesn't necessarily mean that we will be doing well in a couple of weeks. Or if we're not doing well today, that doesn't mean we're not going to be doing well forever. The hope is that with some support, we can get back to feeling healthy. And so what are those things that can affect mental health? The answer is just about anything. But these in particular are some of the components that can really put a young person or anyone at, can impact their mental health, can put them at a higher risk. So our biology, just genetically, do mental health disorders run in the family? Is that something that might be passed down? Our brain chemistry, how much dopamine are we releasing? That just naturally that can change. That can also be impacted by our activities, things that we do. Certainly experiences. So we know that trauma is one of the is actually the number one risk factor for mental health concerns later in life. And so that absolutely can have an impact on mental health. Any type of abuse can have an impact, right? Especially as a young person, but as adults as well, that can have an impact on our mental health. Lifestyle. So nutrition, what are we eating? What are we putting into our bodies? Exercise. There's so much research that shows that exercise really has positive outcomes for positive mental health. So how well are we taking care of our physical health and bodies? And then socially, do we have a network? Do we have people that we engage with, friends? And are those people positive influences or maybe not so much? And then lastly, substances, whether that's medication that you may be taking for any number of situations, whether that's medical or mental health. And certainly the other substances that for young people, we would never recommend: alcohol, drugs, and nicotine. Especially in our youth, as their brains are developing, these have a really significant impact. And so using alcohol, drugs, or nicotine at a young age can put somebody at a higher risk for a mental health concern or a substance use disorder later in life. So there's no one thing, there's no one answer, and it can be different for everybody. There's different components of all of these elements that can really affect our mental health or that contribute to our mental health. So then we in prevention often like to think about kind of the risk factors and the protective factors. So if you think about this as a scale, so our risk factors are the things that are going to put us at a higher risk or put our young people at a higher risk of developing a mental health concern. So that's things like all what I was talking about, the biological, psychological, family, or community. Things like trauma, family conflict, not having many relationships, not being well connected, not having access to physical health care. There's a whole list of kind of risk factors that can put somebody at a higher chance that they may develop a mental health disorder. On the other side, there's also a whole huge list of protective factors and things that we want to make sure that we're building in our young people and in our communities, so that scale is tilted. Even though, yes, you have some risk factors that might put you at a higher chance of developing, you have so many protective factors that can really kind of help tilt that scale and can help buffer against some of those risk factors. So again, this is not an all-inclusive list, but some examples of those would be that community or social engagement. So doing sports teams, clubs, any type of extracurricular activity outside of school, scouts or a faith group, anything that involves relationships can be very positive and healing and is a major protective factor for our young people. Mentorship, certainly, if there's somebody who kind of takes a particular interest and really tries to help guide and shape a young person, that can be a huge protective factor. Again, you'll notice it's a relationship, that positive, consistent relationship. And then also skill building. So how do we really make sure that we're developing coping skills for all of the stressors that are going to hit, problem solving skills, communication skills, giving our young people all of the tools that they need so that, again, when those stressors hit, when life happens, they have a toolbox that they can choose from and use those skills. And also that they have that network of people that they can rely upon, that they can ask for help when they need to, when the situation kind of overwhelms their ability to cope. So that's kind of the overview of what we're talking about. Now we're going to dive into more specifically mental health challenges and what to be looking out for. So when I'm talking about a mental health challenge, this is really the definition that we use is when someone experiences a significant change in their emotion, their thoughts, or their behaviors that significantly impacts more than one area of life over a period of time. So I think about, there's kind of the normal reaction to, again, stress, life, things that happen. For example, grief. You would expect that after a loss, somebody is probably going to have sadness. They might be crying, they might be withdrawn, they might have a hard time sleeping or eating. All of that would sort of be expected given the context. If that, however, continues beyond what, seems like a reasonable time frame, and that can be different for everybody, but if it doesn't even get somewhat better and you're still having all those same symptoms, you're having a hard time sleeping, not eating well, crying a lot, months and months down the road, now we've reached the point where maybe this is more than just sort of your typical standard grief. This might have shifted more into a depression, for example. So it's that length of time. It's important to remember this because, again, with our adolescents in particular, there's going to be changes, right? You're probably going to see what could be called symptoms or signs on a fairly regular basis because that's just part of normal adolescence. But if you start to notice that there's a pattern and that it's going on for longer than normal, that's going to be something that you want to pay attention to, or that it's really significantly impacting some other area of life. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But when we're thinking about, you guys are probably fairly familiar with some mental health challenges or mental health disorders. These are, again, not an all-inclusive list, but it goes over just some of the more common ones that we see in children and adolescents. So anxiety is big, particularly right now. That is one of the big things that we are seeing, as well as depression. So anxiety can be that worry, right? That, you just can't stop thinking about what might go wrong. It could be a specific fear or phobia of something. It could be PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So after trauma, somebody might have some ongoing symptoms of anxiety. Then depression is more going to be that sadness or that irritability. There are substance use disorders where this is beyond just somebody who's experimenting or trying. This is someone who is using and now having, again, a negative impact in their life, or they're trying to stop and they're not able to stop very easily. They have a physical dependence on that substance. Eating disorders. This can be all across the range from not eating enough to eating too much. There's all sorts of different types of eating and body image disorders. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And this is not a disorder in and of itself, but definitely a mental health challenge would be suicidal thoughts and behaviors. So any of these, if you're seeing signs of those are things that you're going to want to pay attention to and you're going to want to follow up on. So we tried to break it down into even more specifically, like what does that really look like? Because we don't expect you to diagnose. In fact, I would not ask you to diagnose. Don't go Googling. If you have a concern, talk to your doctor or somebody that you trust. But you do want to pay attention. You want to be looking out for what might be a sign that my child is having a harder time than their peer or than would be typical. So I'm going to go through each of these, but I just want to highlight before I do, at that bottom right corner, we have the big word change, because this is really critical. You know your child and you know their baseline. And so you're looking for a change in their baseline. So if you have a child who's always been kind of shy, doesn't go out a whole lot, you're not going to be that worried if they continue to be kind of shy and don't go out a lot. That might just not be part of their personality. But if you have a child who used to love to go out, is really outgoing, wants to be involved in everything, and now they have gotten much shyer and withdrawn, that's a change. That's something that you do want to pay attention to. So again, knowing your child and then thinking about, based on baseline, where are we? Have we gone really high? Has it lasted really long? Paying attention to those changes, again, that last over a period of time, because some changes are going to be expected. Sorry, I'm still letting people in as we go. So some of the warning signs to pay attention to: loss of interest in activities. So I'm going to try, when I remember, I'm going to try to sort of compare the difference between typical versus something that might be a warning sign. Changing interest in activities, totally normal, right? The kids try out all sorts of things. So it may be that they used to love baseball and now they've given up baseball entirely and they really want to get into music. Okay, that's typical, right? Like that's sort of something we would expect. However, if you have a young person who is just not interested in anything anymore, that's going to be a concern. So they've stopped baseball, but they're not replacing it with anything else. they just kind of say they don't really care. They'd rather just stay at home all day. There's just kind of a lack of interest in doing much of anything. There's just sort of a blah attitude. Decline in grades or school performance. Again, if they've just enrolled in a bunch of really hard classes and it's kind of taken a little bit of time, that's different. But if you have a student that's usually an A, B student that now has dropped down to C's, D's, they're failing some classes, or they're not turning assignments in when usually they used to really, be on top of their schoolwork, that's going to be something that you want to pay attention to and that you want to follow up on. Certainly if a school personnel tells you, hey, your child used to do a really great job and I'm seeing a change, you want to pay attention to that. You want to ask about that. That worry or anxiety that I was talking about before. So seeing a real significant increase, and that could look a lot of different ways. So it could be a student that's refusing to go to school. It could be one that doesn't want to go to sleep. They don't want to take part in activities, right? They don't want to do any of the sort of school activities or out of school activities that they were interested in. Not because they don't care, but because they've got this worry about it. They're kind of nervous, they're scared. There's something that makes them not want to go because they think something bad is going to happen. That's going to be something that, again, we want to follow up on. And then related, this frequent physical complaints for our youngest students, often they cannot verbalize these things. And so you're going to see it show up as like a stomach ache or a headache, or, some sort of body ache that seems to not have, a physical reason. There might be something, you might need to take them to the doctor, but if it's continuing and there's no physical reason going on, that could be a sign that it's an underlying mental health concern that we want to follow up on. Certainly any significant changes in sleeping or eating. And this would happen probably more suddenly. So again, in adolescence, we're going to expect that now our teenagers are going to want to stay up late and sleep in as late as they possibly can. That's typical. That's part of what we would see. But if you see someone who's either having a really hard time sleeping, they just can't fall asleep, or they wake up a lot during the night, or they're saying they have nightmares, or they wake up really early and they can't go back to sleep, or someone who's just sleeping all the time. There's a difference between kind of that long bits of sleep that our teenagers like to do, especially on the weekends, versus like, no, they don't want to wake up. Like they're sleeping, and any chance they get, they're napping. They want to sleep hours and hours and hours on end. You want to, kind of flag that and follow up on that. Again, eating. So if they start to sort of restrict, they're really specific about what they will or will not eat, or they're paying a lot of attention. They're eating a whole lot more. If you see any significant weight changes, either way, either a significant increase or a significant decrease, that could be a sign or a symptom. Any difficulties in concentrating, again, a change. So all of us sort of have our range of like how well we can concentrate. But these are the ones that get in the way of what they want to do, either at school or at home. And, despite their best efforts, they just have a really hard time concentrating, either because they have so many thoughts going on in their head, or they just kind of, space out and it's hard to really pay attention. That could be something. Engaging in risky behaviors. So, this could be any number of things: substance use, increased sexual behaviors, driving really fast, doing things that could put their physical body at risk would be, again, if you've not had a risky child and then all of a sudden they're starting to be interested in those things, you want to follow up. Change in mood. So, and mood swings, I'm going to kind of tie these together. Again, our kids can have mood swings, especially once they hit puberty, right? We're going to expect that there's going to be a lot of mood swings. So what we're thinking about is those mood swings that are lasting, that are more severe or significant. So we think we're all on that roller coaster, but if it's going really, really high or really, really low, maybe that's too far, right? Your kid who is just so incredibly hyper and running around, just has tons and tons of energy, doesn't know what to do with it. Or, instead of kind of low mood, feeling sad for a day or two, this is low mood that's lasted now for a few weeks. They've been in a low mood. We're going to want to pay attention. Certainly repeated use of alcohol or other drugs. It could be that people are trying things, but if they're starting to use that more, especially because we know that our young people and adults too will turn to substances if they don't have other coping skills or strategies for mental health concerns. So often substances can be a way of trying to cope with some of these other things. So if they're really, really worried about something at school, it may be that they turn to alcohol or nicotine, vaping, something that can kind of calm down that worry. So you want to pay attention, certainly, if you're noticing that your young people are using any types of alcohol or drugs. The withdrawal from friends, from family, again, that activities that they used to enjoy. So again, we would expect maybe friendship groups are going to change as our kids get older. They kind of fall in and out of friends. But this is someone who's really just not making any friends, or they're not wanting to do anything with their friends, or they don't want to come down to the dinner table. They don't want to talk to mom and dad anymore. They don't want to talk to sibling anymore. And some of that, on occasion, that's fine. But if we start to see that that's happening over the course of a few weeks or a month, and they're just not engaging in the same way that they used to, we want to pay attention. And then lastly, just their physical appearance. So again, there's a wide range of what could be normal, right? So you want to know, how is your child normally? Is your child normally somebody that puts themselves together? They have their outfit coordinated, their hair is perfect, everything looks great, and now they're not taking as good a care of themselves? That's something to pay attention to. 1 day or 2 days, fine. They might just be really tired. There might be a lot going on. But if we're starting to see that they're not taking showers, they don't really brush their hair, they're not brushing their teeth, those are all signs that you want to ask about. And we're going to talk a little bit more. I know I'm kind of giving you guys a lot of signs and symptoms, but Lakita's going to talk a little more about what do you do if you notice these things. But these are just, again, kind of a pretty inclusive list of the kinds of things that you just want to keep an eye out for. And if you remember nothing else, it's that change piece. It's that, something seems out of the normal for my kid. My kid is usually like this, and now I'm seeing this. And it's lasting for more than, a week, right? It's lasting for a couple weeks, or it's a really significant or sudden change. Those things are worth following up and talking more to your young person about. All right, the other thing we want to talk just a little bit about to make sure that you guys know sort of how prevalent this is. Again, I'm going to ask for a little participation from the chat, but I'm curious if anyone here knows, we're talking about mental health challenges. How common are they? So 1 in every how many youth struggle with a mental health challenge? So all that list that I went over, 1 in how many do you think struggle with a mental health challenge? All right, we've got a guess of 3, 5, 4, 5. You guys are good. So it is 1 in 5 is our official number. However, that is based on pre-pandemic data. So I would suspect, based on the data that is starting to flow in, that number might be different, and it might be closer to the 1 in 4, as some other people were mentioning, or even more, 1 in 3. But before the pandemic, so the pandemic did not start the mental health sort of challenges of our young people. Our young people there's been a trend for about the last decade or so that our young people's mental health is getting worse, unfortunately. And so pre-pandemic, it was 1 in 5. And once they do that, so hopefully any month now, we're going to get an update on how many, but that's a lot. So in a class of 20 students, that means 4 have a mental health challenge. That's a significant number. Next question. What % of teenagers, if they did struggle with a mental health challenge, would reach out for help when needed? So what % do you think would recognize that they have a mental health challenge and actually ask for help? 10%. Okay. 15, 5. All right, well, I'm kind of happy to tell you guys 26. All right, Jill, you're the closest. It's a little better than you all think. There we go. Sherry was pretty close, 40. So 36%. So it's better than you guys were getting, which is good. That is good news. But also that's only 36%, right? That means 64% of young people would not reach out for help, even though they may recognize that they have a mental health concern. And so part of the work that our team does is really trying to decrease the stigma and increase those help-seeking behaviors, because to compare, in Australia, that number is 64%. So 64% in Australia, 36% in the US. There's something going on in our US culture that is preventing people from feeling comfortable reaching out for help. And that's something that we really want to make sure that we're addressing. All right, in one of the studies that I was able to pull, yes, that data comes from, I can get you the actual research, but it's through our teen mental health first aid program. So it's based on, that's out of the University of Melbourne for that one. The other one is based on a national survey from 2016 of youth mental health. And then this next one that I'm talking about, the what percent of Virginia high school students had serious thoughts of suicide in 2021. This is based on the Virginia Youth Survey that the CDC does every other year. And so the 2021 results. So what percent of high school students do you think had serious thoughts of suicide in 2021? All right, so 64, 20, 20, all right, you guys again are pretty on point. 21%. So to me, that's a pretty concerning number. So that's, more than 2 in 10, again, kind of that 1 in 5. They're not only having a mental health challenge, but they're actually having serious thoughts of suicide. So we need to make sure that we're talking about this and that we're addressing this out in the open. And then it's also important to know, again, we're talking about kind of risk factors and mental health challenges, but on the flip side, those protective factors, what percent of people can develop and grow resilience, that ability to get through adversity and thrive? 77, 68. So this one's kind of a gimme. There it is. Beth got it. 100%. So we believe that part of resilience, the key piece of resilience is relationships, and you are able to grow and build those relationships and those skills. And so that is something that everyone in our community, and it's not just the young person, it's our whole community that can really come together and help to develop and grow resilience in ourselves as well as in our young people. And with that, I will stop yammering because you've heard plenty of me, and I will pass it over to Lakita.
Okay, so just as we talked about, Laura talked about and gave us a brief overview of just mental health in general and youth mental health challenges, the question, may be, so how do we help our youth? And I'm going to try to dive into that briefly because, we have a short amount of time, but just to give some insight on some of the things that we can do to try to help our youth in different capacities that we work with them. So I'm going to ask a question, and if you can drop it in the chat as well. If you had to guess, what do you think it is that keeps people from talking about mental health or youth in general? What do you think is the thing that's stopping them from doing that and being open about mental health?
We did have a quick question in the chat.
Okay.
Let me grab it really quick. Says, does it address efficacy of people trying to help grow resilience? I don't know if Jill, maybe you want to speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, I was just on the data you had and the 100% ability to grow grow resilience. Like, did it talk at all about like the belief of people's ability to like do it, help, all of those pieces?
I'm sorry, I lost you on that last part. The belief of people, what?
People's ability, sorry, I'm in the woods. The belief of people's ability to like grow the efficacy of like their ability to help people grow efficacy, and like the ability that that person can like increase their efficacy.
Yes, so it's around the idea that resilience is not something that people either have or they don't. It's not something that you're just born with or not, but really that it's a quality that you can grow and nurture in people. And it's based, when we're talking about resilience, we're again really talking about a lot of those protective factors. So those relationships with other people, having others that can step in and help when needed, but also skills, coping skills, communication skills, kind of all of these pieces. There's a lot of research about resilience that all shows that it's something that you really can nurture and grow, and that anyone can really sort of move forward to become more resilient. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
we can stay on afterwards if you have more questions.
Okay.
Okay, so just the question was, what keeps people from talking about mental health? And I do see in the chat, someone said trust, stigma. I see not wanting to appear different, fear of standing out, and our society's tendency to label and judge. And that those are all great answers. Judgment from peers, great answers, very truthful. And that's exactly spot on with what we're thinking. One of the most major reasons why we struggle, or the youth struggle, with talking about mental health is because of stigma. And there's a public stigma around mental health, just the feeling of a negative attitude and discriminatory against having to have a mental illness, which makes people want to kind of hold those feelings inside or not feel comfortable to talk to others about it. And then there's also just self-stigma, the things that we tell ourselves individually, that it's shameful, that, something's wrong with me. I shouldn't be battling this. So the thing we want to do is to make it more normalized, to make the conversation more normalized, so that youth and just adults and people in general feel comfortable being able to talk about the stigma and where it comes from. We know from culturally, some cultures feel like that mental health, we don't need help. We don't need to seek the help of a counselor. We don't need to seek any help for mental health, or mental illness isn't real. So those things kind of give the pushback and make some people internalize and not get the help and the support that they need. And that's what we're trying to move away from. So stigma is one of the largest areas, or the reasons why we don't talk about mental health. Thank you for all those answers, by the way. And next, we're going to watch a little video about stigma, just to give a little bit more insight into it.
You know that feeling where your thoughts scare you or make life tough? Sometimes it feels like no one else in the world has those thoughts or feelings. No one seems to know how difficult it is to deal with your feelings. And it's not easy to share your deepest secrets. You might think something is wrong with you. Or you might worry what other people think. And all of that makes your thoughts and feelings worse. Our culture has created this environment of shame. Until the 1960s, society sent people away if they had challenges managing their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Over time, we learned that we didn't have to be afraid. We learned how to help people get better. We became hopeful. But there are remnants of those images in our culture today, which is why some people still feel uncomfortable talking about it. The stigma has taken new forms too. With more access to more people all the time, it can seem like the world is telling us it's not okay to be anything but perfect. The truth is, everyone has thoughts or feelings that can be hard to deal with. So why do we make it so difficult on ourselves by judging others who could be going through the same challenges we are? What if, instead of seeing labels, we saw people who are struggling and could be there for them so they didn't feel so alone? What if we looked past our fear of mental health and started to talk about it in a constructive way? What if, as a society, we used empowering words and healthy images to help people feel supported? Maybe then more of us could feel comfortable telling others when we're having a hard time. Maybe more people would get the help they need. And maybe one day we won't have to talk separately about mental health and physical health, but just health. The truth is, each of us has the power to change our culture. Will you join us? Share this video with a kid, your neighbor, a friend, and help us break the stigma of mental health.
So again, yes, everything in that video definitely resonates. It's true. Working at the high school, I know a lot of students who you have to kind of assure them that it's okay to get mental health support and it's okay to be feeling a certain way. You may think, well, we hear it all the time now, but some students still hear or feel like it's not okay. So just continuing to open up that conversation to let everyone know that we all are battling different things. Like Laura shared, the continuum, we all fall on that, regardless if we feel like we're completely healthy or we're not. We can all battle some kind of mental health issue throughout our life. So the next thing we could do is to create a community of care. And you may say, like, how do we do that? So in the community of care, that's where stigmatism or negative attitudes towards mental health are not common, where we use positive language and we openly discuss the issues and the feelings that everyone's having. Normalized conversation around, having feelings of mental health issues or mental illness. And ways that we could do that is just to notice, like we talked about, all the differences or all the signs that someone's battling something at the time, just paying attention, noticing those changes in thoughts and those changes in their behavior, the differences that aren't normally there, just taking a notice to those things. And then just feeling comfortable enough to ask just directly and be like, are you okay? I feel like this seems different from your normal, and I just want to make sure you're okay. So when you directly ask, it just gives them the space to want to talk if they want to, but also lets them know that you care and that you're paying attention and you notice that they may be going through something at the time. Also being able to listen. We always talked about effective listening and being supportive and just listening to whatever it is that the youth is going through specifically, or if it's an adult, but just definitely just listening and not having a attitude of judgment, but just more of support. That usually goes a long way to help them feel like you care. And lastly, listening is great, but we also know that sometimes there is a need for professional help. So being able to figure out what supports they are willing to work with or what supports are readily available. Because sometimes listening, you may say, okay, well, I don't have the skills to help them, but I need to connect them with someone who does. And that's just how we create that community of care. And it doesn't have to be because of your profession. It could just be because of who you are in the community, because of who you are as a friend. If you're in a school-based setting like me, that helps them to know that you are paying attention and that if there is something going on, they can either refer someone to talk to you or talk to you when they're going through something and just be a part of that community. Okay. So you may ask, like, when do you feel like it's time to get help? I feel like whenever there's a crisis and you feel like, I feel like they need extra help, then it's better safe than sorry to just seek help. And if it's not a bad situation that doesn't need help, then you still connected them with someone. If that thought's in your mind, like I should connect them with someone, I feel like it's okay to do that. But some of the reasons why you definitely want to get help is if they mention suicidal thoughts or suicidal behaviors, self-harm, hurting themselves, or if you notice that maybe signs of self-harm, like some cuts or, covering up their self when it may be really hot and they're covering up because they don't want to show certain parts, of their body. That's always a reason to try to connect them with someone. Substance misuse, if like they're self-medicating with drugs or nicotine, mentioning of overdose or just being involved in those kind of situations, definitely want to get them help. And psychosis is just if they're disconnected from reality, if you're talking to them and it seems like they are not really understanding what's going on around them or don't have a clear judgment, then that's times when you definitely want to get help and not definitely listen, but definitely connect them with someone to make sure they get the supports that they need. And as far as who can help, I feel like we have a ton of mental health supports around, but it's just about connecting them with the right ones, or people that they're willing to connect with. Medical doctors, if they have a primary physician, just being able to connect them with the doctor, nurse practitioners, psychologists in the school, or just psychologists in general, social workers in the school, or just social workers in general, counselors, therapists, crisis support specialists. I'll eventually give you some numbers and some hotlines too, or substance use professionals and certified peer specialists. So in the schools, for me, just given from what I know, like we have school psychologists, we have school social workers, we have Region 10 workers in the school. So there are a lot of different supports, but just being able to connect them with someone. And I think it's okay to ask, like, you know, are you okay if I connect you with your doctor? Are you okay if I connect you with the counselor at school? Or, you know, just giving them different options. So if you know all the different supports that are readily available, then you can just pull from one, and then hopefully they would feel comfortable in talking to at least one of those. So here's some of the hotlines, just the local and national resources for suicide prevention, the regional crisis call center, and we can give you all these numbers at the end. Ready Kids, Help Happens, Psychology Today, but just being able to also give them these hotlines would be good too, if, you know, they're going and you maybe feel like they're okay, but hey, let me send you with this information as well, as just another false safe, just to have someone that they can call at all times. Okay, so the next session is just on self-care and resilience and recovery. Self-care just refers to us and how we take care of ourselves. It can look different for a lot of different people. Physically, it could be exercise or going for a walk. Emotionally, it could be talking to a counselor. It could be just talking to a friend, releasing some pent-up feelings. Spiritually, it could be prayer. It could be meditating. Intellectual, it could be just, you know, taking time to read a book, taking time to listen to a podcast. Environmental, it could be doing something in the environment or something to take care of the environment around you. And relational, it could just be building relationships or working on building stronger relationships. Of course, it's definitely individualized, but the importance of self-care is just knowing that if we don't pretty much fill up our own tank, then it's hard to give from an empty tank. So to make sure we're taking care of ourselves, to help others who are battling mental health illness or mental illness, or to just be able to give from that pool. I do feel like that we can also pass the message of self-care to those that we're helping, because a lot of times self-care is needed, not just for you to fill out, but for the person who may be battling mental illness as well. Okay, so resilience and recovery. So Laura talked about recovery, and, you know, the message that we like to give the youth is to know that everyone's able to recover. It doesn't mean if they're battling a mental illness or mental challenge that has to be for life, that this could be something that they could recover from, that this is something that they can make it through, working on that continuum, just knowing that, you know, they can improve their health, they can improve their wellness, and they can live a successful life, because I think a lot of times in the midst of it, they don't feel like that's possible. So letting them know that, you know, there's another side and they can make it through, and giving them that support and that positive message is always really helpful. And resilience is just the process of, you know, just adapting to life experiences, getting through certain things like mental illness, behavioral flexibility, just letting them know that they can make it through these things, giving support, showing them, again, like signs or people who've made it through the recovery stages, connecting them with social resources, engaging them with things in the community that can help them to develop positive coping strategies. Definitely, this could be counseling, this could be support groups, it could be different things depending on the youth or the situation, but definitely just giving the message of resilience and recovery is possible. And again, so this was definitely a broad, just information about the subject, but Region 10 does a lot of in-depth training. I feel like youth mental first aid is very helpful. It touches on all the things that the youth are struggling with currently and how to help them to be successful and how to help them take an active role on noticing when youth and their peers are going through something as well. So Region 10 has trainings on mental health and first aid for youth, adults. There's also the Community Resilience Initiative, the Suicide Awareness and Prevention, the Safe Talks, also the ACEs training, Adverse Childhood Experiences, the Revive training, and the Youth Tobacco and Nicotine Use Prevention efforts. And that is pretty much it for me. I know that was just a trickle of information, but if you have any questions and you want to drop them in the chat, feel free to do so.